Hi, welcome to another exciting episode of the Andre the Beast Creighton Show. Another exciting show, another exciting guest, and we're back with part two. If you saw part one, which I know you did, it's just blowing up. This is part two. And we had to do a part two because something caught my attention. And it was called Africa Orphans or Orphans Africa in Tanzania. And I was thinking to myself after interviewing this beautiful young lady, like, what's the connection here? Like, you know, Caucasian woman, you know, you got a Fall Creek Plantation trilogy, you know, the narratives from black to white, the history, the stories, and now you're in Africa, Tanzania. So without further ado, let's bring her back with part two, the one, the only Miss Michele M.E. Torrey, back to the show. What's going on, baby girl?
Oh, it's great to be here once again, Andre. Thank you so much for asking me back.
For the viewers, wait a minute. For the viewers who didn't get a chance to see part one, tell the viewers a little bit about who you are before we get into the part about the Tanzania and the orphan African.
So my name is Michele Torrey. I write under the name M.E. Torrey. I was in the children's book industry for about 20 years, have 12 children's books published, and just published my first book for adults called Fox Creek. My life has been fairly interesting, ups and downs, of course, like anybody's life. I live in Washington State, and Fox Creek is about a Fox Creek plantation in the American South. So to write that book, of course, I had to do a lot of research. It opened my eyes to not only our history, but to today's race relations as well. And helped me to understand my own white privilege, which if you're white, you have white privilege. Trust me on that. But I will say with Orphans Africa, that is an organization that I co-founded with my husband and one of our best friends, Lisa de Guzman. And we just started in Tanzania with kind of organizing with the grassroots organizations over there. And backing up, I will say that I don't know why, but for whatever reason, from a very young child, I've always felt drawn to Africa. And like I said, I don't know why, but maybe this is why, because I had work there to do.
I'm gonna throw a little humor in this. Could it be in a past life that you might have been one of us?
Might have been. I'm going with that one. Yeah.
So, what was this? Let's go and talk about this. Orphans Africa, the non-for-profit. Why Africa? Because I'm pretty sure we have somewhat similarities even in this country, but what's the difference that made you go there? You say you had a longing for it. It was in your gut, but you will have some people on American soil. They'd be like, you know what? We have somewhat the same thing going on here in America.
That's a great question. Well, like I said, I have always felt drawn to Africa. And so I think just my soul led me there to do the work. Now, just because we're busy in Africa doesn't mean that you can ignore what's happening in your local community or nationally by any means, because like you said, people here need help as well. And, I make sure that I do cover my local, needs as well as international. And as far as why there and not here, there is a big difference. We have a lot of social programs here. So if somebody were super destitute, they could get food from a food bank. They could call upon a local church. They might be able to sign up for welfare. or unemployment, those kinds of things. We have nets to catch us. Are they perfect nets? Not at all. I mean, there's holes here and there, and people do fall through those holes. But for the most part, we have a lot of assistance here in the United States. Not only do we have a lot of assistance, but we have a lot of abundance as well. So people who are more abundant, perhaps, than the vast majority of humanity. Now, in Tanzania, there is no safety net at all. There are no government programs for helping out the indigent, the starving, and particularly the orphans. So in Tanzania, that whole country, and in fact, that whole area in Africa, which would include Kenya, Uganda, Rwanda, and all the way down into South Africa, has been decimated by AIDS, such that you have orphans who might be, a baby all the way up to maybe 18 years old. And then you have the grandmas and grandpas, and that middle generation, much of it has been wiped out. Okay, so you have grandmas and grandpas who are raising the orphans. Now, if you imagine a grandma and grandpa, they're in their 60s, their 70s, and they had, I'll give you one example, friends of mine, we call them Bibi, which means grandma, and Babu, which means grandpa. They had 10 children. All 10 are dead. But from those 10 children, they have many, many grandchildren. Now, you can't possibly expect poor subsistence farmers then to be able to support what could be dozens of grandchildren. So what's happened in a lot of the faraway villages, those villages that are removed from metropolitan areas, is you have children who are head of households at a very young age. And it's up to them to farm the fields. It's up to them to figure out how they're going to get their education. They can't go to the welfare office. They can't even see a doctor. There's like one doctor per every 100,000 people. So you see the huge obstacles that exist in Tanzania that aren't necessarily the same as how they exist here.
But some people, I was a history teacher, so I get it. But what I can't understand, and I'm not knocking, I applaud you and your husband and the many people that support this thing. But I got to go into the minds of my listeners who are listening to this. You would think when you see Feed the Children and these commercials that been out long before I was even born that are still circulating and stuff, that Africana and African, the continent itself is so vast with resources that I find it inconceivable that they still are in a state of destitute. Does that know what I'm saying? It's kind of like you see them with clothes and stuff, and it's kind of like, why can't you, as a country as big as that with so much resources? I just can't fathom that when they've been asking for resources ever since I was a kid and still doing it.
Right. Well, the first part in understanding that is just realizing just how big the continent of Africa is. 3 United States, the continental United States, could fit in Africa. So we're talking about a huge region. Tanzania is 1.5 times the size of Texas. So when we see Tanzania on a map, it looks pretty small, but it's actually quite big. So when 85% of Tanzanians live through subsistence, and let's say you have a drought, then, things aren't going to go well for a lot of those people. Now, if you imagine, and it is true that out of a population of 65 million people, 3 million of those are orphans due to AIDS, cholera, tuberculosis, malaria, and so on. That's a lot of orphans per population. Now I'm going to break it down even further. In that population, get this, the median age is only 18 years old. I don't know what our median age is, but it's probably somewhere around 35 to 40. And what that means is half of the people in Tanzania are over the age of 18 and half of them are under the age of 18. So now you have half of 65 million people trying to take care of 3 million orphans, plus all the other children that may or may not be orphans. So that's a huge, and no government help. Huge burden.
So why isn't there government help? I mean, they're part of, it would be like the United States, everybody's in the melting pot, even though it's sanctioned by state, region, and so forth. But there's a system of checks and balances. You're talking about a colony that's been around for centuries, way before America.
Right. I think. Go ahead.
No, I'm. Believe me, this platform also educates, and you can educate me because you've been there. So, but I still find it difficult to understand that there's humongous cities in there that's not grasping their fellow neighbors. If that would be politically correct.
Right. So, I think before the white settlers arrived, I'm talking German and British, that Africa was probably in better shape at that time. But then over centuries, as I'm sure all the listeners are aware, the slave trade occurred, which really depleted the continent of course, a huge valuable resource, and that was human beings, almost always in the prime of their lives. And so that was happening. And then you had tribe turn against tribe because they were making deals with whoever was in power. Okay, if you give me this, I promise you this many people and that kind of thing. And so when we had Western influence in the most horrific way, everything started to decline from the coasts inward. And then colonization happened at the same time. So you've got the British claiming their stake, and the Germans and the Dutch and so on, the Portuguese, you name it. Everybody says, well, this country used to belong to you, tribes, but there's 200 tribes, and I'm going to draw this line and call it mine. And so what happened during colonialization was that they were taking all the resources and they weren't giving it to the African people. They were simply shipping it back to the mother country or using it to enrich themselves. It wasn't until like the 1960s that we saw nations such as Tanzania start to rise up against their colonial oppressors and say, no, we want to be independent. We've had enough of you. Get out. There were a couple of wars fought about that, but for the most part, once those wars ended and the colonizers left, the other colonial powers said, okay, fine, have your country back. This happened in Tanzania. It used to be called Tanganyika, which was a combination of Tanzania and Zanzibar. And when the British who had occupied Tanzania left, it became Tanzania, which is modern day Tanzania, which includes Zanzibar. It is not a mistake that, okay, let me back up and say the people of Tanzania had high hopes when they achieved their independence. They thought that they would have a person in power who was one of them, who would then allow the riches and the resources of the country to then enrich all of them. Mm-hmm. That's not what happened. What happened in Tanzania, as like other countries elsewhere, is it may have happened that way initially, but pretty soon people who got into power became corrupt, and they brokered deals with other countries or corporations, businesses of, okay, you give me this much money and I'm going to ship you all of our diamonds. I'm going to give you all of our tanzanite or whatever it might be. And that continues today. So that would be a huge reason why Tanzania is still in poverty, although they are making strides. When I went to one of our most remote villages in Bujela, which is way out in the middle of nowhere, and it's clear up in the mountains, when we drove there, no electricity, no water. Well, they had water, but it was way down this muddy, basically embankment, and one little trickle for the whole village of several thousand people. And the average education was second grade, and disease rampant. So,
how do you survive? I mean, how do you develop the survival skills to keep the tribe sustainable? I mean, I'm believe me, I'm just trying to wrap my hand around it. You've been there longer than me, but if you have a second grade education, I mean, you probably know how to hunt, I guess, basic fundamentals, but who's making decisions to collaborate with the infrastructure? Because their infrastructure would be the Cape and stuff like this, where there's resources available to speak on their behalf and say, look, we're suffering here.
Right. Well, that's very difficult to answer. I would say in the case of the village of Bujela, it was led, and it is being led by a group of village elders, which comprise men and women, mostly women. And these were the people lucky enough to reach adulthood and who, I think, showed tremendous wisdom. So while they may not have, even a primary school education, they were incredibly wise, and they are incredibly wise. And they
what do
were
you mean you say incredibly wise to the listeners? Because when I hear second and third grade level of education, I'm trying to fathom what would be considered wise.
So there's a difference between being ignorant and not having the knowledge, let's say, to do basic math or to do to write necessarily a letter to the government that's cohesive and legible. But they were able to nonetheless make decisions for the future of their village. So they got together and they reached out. And to this day, I don't quite know how they reached out, but they were able to get people to come into their village who had an interest in educating orphans. And they were able to say, we need your help. What can you do for us? And then likewise, they were able to work, I think it was Doctors Without Borders. They were able to say, we have no clinic. Can you build a clinic here? So there were certain steps that they were able to take. They, first of all, identified what's the need. We need education. We need healthcare. And then they were able to take steps to find people to help them. So that would be an example of wisdom. Another example of wisdom would be, I was involved when they had a falling out with a particular gentleman in their group of elders. And this gentleman had betrayed their trust in a variety of ways. And it was only just being realized the depth of his betrayal.
What do you mean by that? I think the viewers need to understand that.
It was a betrayal of, it was a theft of money, and it was a theft of goods of theft of resources that belonged to the community as a whole. And this person was taking these resources and selling them on the side. When this came to light, in the United States, we would have completely rejected this person and they would have become an outcast. But in this village, you have to understand that these people, they're born there, they live their lives there, and they die there. And so have their parents and their grandparents. So there's this ancestry that predates even their existence in that same village. So when someone that they've known all their lives makes this egregious error. Instead of being angry and yelling at them, or what I was expecting, that kind of behavior, instead they gathered around him and they made a circle and they just held him in their embrace. And I was deeply touched by that. It taught me volumes of interpersonal relationships, but it taught me also the wisdom of their village and how they're able to, through the centuries, keep peace.
So now you come in and you see, and thanks for sharing a little bit of the culture.
Yes.
Because like I said, nobody knows better than somebody who's actually been there on the forefront. My question is, so now you come in and you recognize a need. But remember, this has been going on for several years. What is your program doing to take it to another level?
So the orphan school, and I'll continue to use this village as an example. The orphan school there was already functioning when we arrived. It had 84 orphans, and they were being taught by a volunteer who had actually gone to high school, so he knew a thing or two, and he didn't get paid. He just walked around the village asking for his dinner. And they had built a little bamboo shack to help house these students with a bamboo outhouse and so on. So we come and here's this school property. 6 acres was what the village donated for this school. And they basically said, can you help us? We're trying to help the orphan population here, but we don't have any money and we need help. And they did. Trust me, they needed a lot of help. So we agreed to do that. Now, one of the things that Orphans Africa is very clear about is that we're not about just handing out money and handing out just promises. We instead are very clear from the beginning that we are there to empower people, to help them rise to their own giftedness. And that was a very difficult lesson for the people of Bujela to learn, because in their mind, they had hit the jackpot. The rich Americans are there. The whites are there. We're going to save the day. And money will never be a problem again because all Americans are wealthy, as you know. And so that was kind of what we were up against.
What do they get that mindset if they don't have resources? They don't have a television.
Yeah.
Radio. Yeah. They don't have plumbing. So how did this myth about America and white come in? And more importantly, how do they look at blacks that are in America?
Well, I think
what if I showed up and I'm from America? Whoa.
They might be a little confused, honestly. We had a Black American come with us as part of our team one year, and people were confused. They had no idea that there were blacks in America. They didn't know.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
Yeah.
That is
so that was an opportunity to educate how they hear about Americans with wealth. It's just word of mouth. They just hear about it, but they've also heard stories like white people will cook children and eat them. So a lot of little children, when they see us, they'll run crying and hide in their mother's skirts, until they learn that, no, we don't actually eat you. We're going to pass out some lollipops and,
So
anyway,
they're getting their information from who though? Are they going into the city? Or are the Afrikaners coming into their tribe? Intermingling with them. Like, how are they getting their source of information?
It's going to start from your bigger cities, go out to satellite towns, and then out to the villages from there. Yeah. So just word of mouth. Things get around. Yeah. So, and USAID, of course, was a big deal there too. And so aid from, I think President Bush Bush Jr. is the one who pushed a lot of aid for Tanzania. And so that was very helpful to them. So in their minds, the Americans were, I hate to say this, but were their saviors. And that was a very dangerous and difficult mindset to break this, to break of the people in Bujela, the village elders. They couldn't understand why we just didn't simply give them more money. If they had a problem, well, money solves it. Give us money. We'll solve it. And oftentimes we would be pulling back and we would say, no, this is what needs to happen. And when we would do this, it was always in community with the elders of the village. And we would say things like, we won't be here forever. And you need to learn to help support the school yourself. How can we do that? And they would come up with ideas. Well, we can do beekeeping. Oh, that's a great idea. Let's do beekeeping. Oh, we can sell honey in town. Great idea. Well, we can have a barber shop and we'll open it up to the public. Great idea. And you can teach kids how to be barbers. Oh, that's super. We can do this and we can do that. And so that's exactly what's happened. So more and more and more, this Mwaji Secondary School, where we've got it, has become self-sufficient. And in fact, the last time I was there, it's almost like they didn't even need me. It's like, oh, hi, Michele. Certainly nice to see you. And by the way, we've got a lot to do. See you later. And off they go. And that's what we want to see. We want to see their self-reliance. And we've been now doing this. We're in our 19th year. We've been doing this so long. They get it now. They understand. And now they're no longer surprised by some of the things that we say and some of the things that we ask of them. They're no longer surprised.
Let me cut you off. What are at least three of the major things that they really needed to understand how to develop and that will allow them to continuously prosper? Because to me, it seemed like to me they need communication. That would be like the first means of survival for me. You know, you don't really have an accurate means of communication other than word of mouth. Then the second would be, electricity. The next one will be water. You definitely got to have a filtration system,
right?
And some type of to find out what their resources is. Is it just farming? Is it tanzanite? Is it diamonds? How did you guys, put in perspective the level of importance for these people? That way they can thrive.
The first thing was we had to meet their basic needs. So really what Orphans Africa does, besides teach empowerment, and is we build infrastructure, and along with that infrastructure, we're always attuned to meeting basic needs. So we drilled 2 deep water wells, bringing in huge equipment and going down. We had to go down 300 meters. Wow. So that's a third of a kilometer through rock. And we finally got a well in way up on top of a hill, and then a well lower down as well. And that provides, we have spigots now throughout the campus, and the community is also welcome to come and, get their water from this deep water well as well. So in that sense, we build good community goodwill. We build goodwill in the community, and that's really important. The other thing is we continue to advocate on behalf of the village with whoever is the government in charge of, whether it's the town or let's say a county. I don't think they call it county, but we need electricity in this town. When are you going to do it? And we continue to advocate. Now they have electrical. So, and then we also, before they had electrical, we installed solar panels on all of our buildings. And by the way, we have 18 structures now, and the campus is 36 acres. And we have
So where's your electricity coming from? Is it wind turbines?
It's solar. It's solar. And then when solar fades or they have a cloudy day or whatever, it's not enough. They do have it hardwired in the ground. It's buried electrical now from the city.
Why do you
from
think
the years by city?
You talked about 6 acres? Exactly how big is the area of Tanzania? Because we also talking about population growth too. So how big is it? To me, because that would determine the amount of progress that the town or the state or country, whatever, can actually grow to develop more research and become economically not a powerhouse, but at least economically sound.
Right. Well, our school started out at 6 acres, and then when it became clear we were going to grow bigger than that, we asked the village to provide another 30 acres, and they did that. Now, understand, this school doesn't belong to Orphans Africa. The school belongs to the NGO that the village elders started themselves. So it belongs to the NGO, and the village elders then are part of the school board. So they own it. They operate it. And I think that's very important that they have ownership. So as far as the area of Tanzania, it's 1.5 times the size of Texas. That's big. Okay. When we're in Dar es Salaam, which is a huge city on the Indian Ocean side, and by the way, it's right below the equator on the Indian Ocean, we get on the airplane when we're done in Dar es Salaam, and we fly for an hour and a half over to Mbeya, which is the biggest city over on the east side, kind of the southeast side of the country. Well, that's a pretty long flight. I can get from Washington to like San Francisco in an hour and a half. So, you know, that's a considerable distance. So what were some of your other questions regarding
how much of that area is usable area? Because you're talking Africa. So I'm pretty sure a lot of that stuff is wildlife. A lot of it is rivers. A lot of it is rough terrain. So how much of Tanzania is actually usable that they can become an independent economic power in their region?
I think a lot of it is usable. They do have a mountain range that goes through that, and it includes Mount Kilimanjaro, which is the highest mountain in Tanzania. And then they also have a lot of national parks. So if you were to go near Mount Kilimanjaro, it's surrounded by the Ngoro Basin, and that's, you know, safaris and all that kind of stuff. And then in the middle of Tanzania, there's also, I forget the name of that park, but there's another national park that you drive through, and I have driven across.
Is it Kruger National Park?
What is it?
Is it Kruger National Park?
No, Ngorongoro. That's what it is.
Okay.
Ngorongoro. And that's got, you know, your typical African wild beasts there that you can see as you drive across. But, you know, the national parks are, while they're big, there's still a lot of country left. A lot of space to grow. Some of Tanzania is very, very dry. And then the crops don't grow until it's the rainy season. And then all of a sudden, you know, everything grows and you harvest it kind of before the end of the next dry season. Mm-hmm. And then there's lush areas like in Bujela, it's all jungle. And then over on near Dar es Salaam, it's all sand. So, but they're still able to do a lot of farming. We actually have a farm over in eastern Tanzania, near Dar es Salaam. And while the soil is sandy, if you water it enough, and we have kind of a little lake that we pump water from, if you water it enough, you can still get a lot of nice fruits and vegetables. And that is the thing about Tanzania, is it's rich. It's rich. Its soil is rich. When I first went to Bujela, I noticed that even though the soil looked amazingly rich and the jungle is just like lush, the farmers had spindly crops. And I'm thinking to myself, okay, something's not adding up here. And I found out that when they had animals, like a cow, they're digging a hole and throwing the manure in a hole and covering it back up, And I said, well, wait a second here. Manure is actually a fertilizer, and they were very reluctant to put it on the vegetables and so on. But that's, and we sent some students away to learn farming. And then they came back and were so successful in farming certain areas of the school property that village elders would come by and they'd say, and these are all girls, they'd say, tell us how you did that, because their crops were so lush.
How did you get them to change their spiritual and their cultural beliefs? Because now you're hardwiring centuries of tradition to put something as simple as manure into the ground versus using it, converting it into fertilization.
It's one thing to tell them something like, don't put clean dishes in the dirt. Here's why, blah, 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 blah. The moment your back is turned, they will keep doing what they've been doing for generations, right? So you're absolutely right about that. The only way that we could figure, and we learned that the hard way through kind of observing, patterns of behavior. The only way that we could change that was we literally sent 3 girls away for 2 weeks of living on it was called permaculture, a permaculture farm where everything had 3 layers. So you have your uppermost canopy, your middle canopy, and then your bottom canopy. So maybe banana trees, coffee plants, and then your tomatoes down below. And they had compostable toilets, and these kids lived on this permaculture farm. And they learned in classroom settings as well as, actually being out in the fields, learning all these techniques. And they learned about keyhole gardens and how to irrigate, how to fertilize, and so on. And these 3 girls came back to the Mwaji Secondary School filled with knowledge. And they started their own farm there to help supplement the school diet. And at the same time, and per our request, they started teaching other students, this is how you do it, and this is why you do it. And when their little plots of land became so productive and so vibrant as compared to the regular way of farming in Bujela, which was spindly, that's when the farmers started coming up to the girls and saying, what are you doing? What's the difference? And that's what changed for them.
So almost like a monkey see, monkey do.
Yeah. We could have said it till we were blue in the face. It wouldn't have mattered. But once they learned it on their own, that's what made the difference.
Did you ever worry about them using the word colonization? Because let's get real, Africa was part of a little bit of that colonization. Did that ever cross their mind, or as a fear factor? What was the fear factors of white appearances in a culture that, like you said, they've been doing stuff for years, but they have a mindset that, on the other hand, that white privilege is going to come in and save us? But did the thought of colonization ever become a fear factor with them? You might accept this, but let's look at history too.
Yeah. In the places that we've worked, that hasn't been the case. But when we've traveled in Africa, every now and then we'll come across somebody who will question our presence there.
Right.
And they don't necessarily know us, and they certainly don't know what we do, but they'll question our presence there. So the question is there. And, they have every right to question that, absolutely. And if we were at our projects, and we have 6 projects, if we were at our projects with every intention of not teaching empowerment, of just teaching dependence and continuing that cycle of dependence, then that critique would be absolutely valid. Absolutely. And we shouldn't even be there. But because we are teaching empowerment, and because more and more they don't need us, then I think we've done our work.
Yeah.
And, within a few years, we hope to be able to say, you're on your own. And they're going to, instead of going, but wait a second, they're going to go, well, aren't you going to visit? And that's a completely different. Yes, of course we're going to visit.
How do you address, before we wrap up, and thank you so much for taking time out to come and do part 2 to educate even myself on being over in another country, and people need to understand, even from listening to you, we need to be thankful for what we got. Things that we take for granted here, you had to teach other humans how to do it. You know what I mean?
Right.
Now let's go to something deeper. You're talking about AIDS and how AIDS has devastated the Tanzanian community. Another resource that I think is vital would be, healthcare. How are you dealing with that? And how are they accepting Western medication? Leaves, plants, the natural resources that are there versus our medicine, penicillin and antibiotics and stuff like that. How do you convert them over?
Again, you asked a really good question. So first of all, we buy health insurance for all of our students, and it doesn't cost much. It's not like in the United States. Health insurance there is only about $5 per child per year. So when I say we buy health insurance for them, it's not much. But what that means is that when a child is sick in the past, and we'd seen this in the past. Let's say a child is out on the field playing soccer, and suddenly they feel faint and they're not feeling good, and nobody knows what to do for them. So they take them under a shade bush, they sit them there, and they say, "Okay, we hope you feel better." And they leave them there while they go and play soccer, and they check up on them occasionally. Well, people have actually died sitting there in the shade bush. The little clinic that's in Bujela, for example, is good for a cut, and it might be good for maybe setting a splint on a broken bone, as long as that broken bone doesn't need surgery or an x-ray. Okay. Beyond that, they would have to go to a larger town. Now that we have health insurance, and now that all of our schools have vehicles like Land Rovers, 4-wheelers, they can take a sick child into the truck or the Land Rover and take them to a hospital and get them real health care, real meaning Western medicine with x-rays and antibiotics and so on. Now there exists, and there have always existed, and there still exists, what we would call witch doctors. And witch doctors can be very dangerous. And we've encountered this because witch doctors have a long tradition and they're very well respected, becoming less and less so. And the witch doctor, for one of our children who had AIDS, and he had been prescribed AIDS medication as part of USAID. And he was taking the AIDS medication, and then the witch doctor told him that, no, you can't take the AIDS medication. I forget the reason why, but he stopped taking it because the witch doctor told him to stop. And his name was Stanley, and Stanley got sick again and started getting skinny again. And then we arrived and we said, no, you can't do that. You have to take your medicine. You have to. And then he started taking it again and started plumping out again and was eventually able to graduate from high school and so on. So that was a good intervention there. But another way that witch doctors have been very harmful is there's a lot of albinoism in Tanzania. I think an incidence of 1 out of every 200 births is an albino. And witch doctors told people that if you chop off an arm or a leg from an albino, you will become wealthy. And so albinos all over Tanzania were being hunted. And a lot of them did lose limbs. A lot of them were killed. And I met one of the albinos that one of our village elders had gone out into the bush, had heard of an albino was hiding out there, brought her back and was hiding her. And once you can get them into a larger, village population, places that have schools and hospitals and stuff like that, education is better and they don't tend to believe stuff like that. And so an albino will be safe in that environment, not so much out in the village.
Please tell me that's not going on currently to today.
I think that ended about 3 or 4 years ago. But it's been a real problem. And it went on for over a decade. It was serious.
How do you,
as far as healing with, herbs and leaves and things like that, Lisa de Guzman, who's one of our co-founders, she is a registered nurse and she grew up in the Philippines. And that's how her grandmother did medicine, like steeping guava leaves and things like that. And they have guava. And so Lisa did an entire course on, kind of community medicine. How do you help each other? If somebody's got a tummy ache, what do? You don't have to go to the doctor necessarily. You might be able to do this, you might be able to do that, but all solid medicine nonetheless.
Before we wrap up, how do you determine, or what's the protocol for selecting the next group of individuals to actually represent the growth and development of the new Tanzania that you guys are putting together at Orphan Africa?
That was difficult to start with, but it all started with one connection that I made with an NGO over in Tanzania. And this NGO had all the connections with the various school campuses that we now operate. I don't know if we are going to adopt another project because I'm getting older. We all are, and we're not done with the projects as they are. They still require some infrastructure development. We have Evoke Tech College that is our newest project, and it requires quite a few new buildings. Each building is about $30,000. So we're still kind of deep into it as far as development before we can step away. But I do think, our main goal is to mature the projects that we have and make sure that they're stable on their feet before we send them on their way.
I want to personally reach out and say thank you so much for taking time out to come and educate us and share such a remarkable story of your life from the cotton fields to the motherland. And what do you need from us? I think this is a beautiful story of that beast mindset, but what it also resonates is that we all have a common thread called humanity. What do we need to do to further see the vision of what you want in the vision of just humanity, no matter where they're at, even if they're in the United States or our brothers and sisters that are abroad? What do we need to do to help see your vision through and to help everybody?
Well, I think for every human being, it starts with having an open heart. Okay. So many of us, we've already decided, or we pre-decide, or we base it on somebody else's opinion, who will help and when and how. But I'd say opening our hearts to possibilities is key, because I never, ever could have realized what I would be doing in Tanzania. And if I'd known, I might have run in the other direction, full speed. I never could have known without having an open heart and a willingness to take a step. Okay. And once I did that and kept this open heart, I believe the Spirit kept saying, okay, now we're going to do this, and now we're going to do that. And I think that's critical for healing ourselves as a species, a humanity, healing ourselves, being kind to one another, and healing the planet on which we share.
How can the viewers reach out to you and know more about Orphan Africa?
Go to our website. It's orphans with an S, africa.org, O-R-G. And you can read more about all of our projects, about who we are, including the people who have boots on the ground there in Africa, and then how you can help us. There's ways we've got that you can help. And then as far as my book, Fox Creek, you can reach me at METorrey, TORREY.com.
Ladies and gentlemen, make sure you subscribe, like, share, pass this information on. All it takes is one click of a button to make a difference in somebody's life, even your own. Torrey, thank you so much. This has been another, and I do mean another, exciting episode of the Andre the Beast Creighton Show.